Welcome to Fridays at Psych Central. We are like simulcasting across, I don't know, a dozen or so different Facebook channels, YouTube channels, Twitter, and a whole bunch of places that I have never heard of. So thank you so much for tuning in. For the next half hour or so, I am going to talk to an uber cool guest about uber cool things. But before we get to her, my name is Gabe Howard, and I am the host of the Psych Central podcast. Psych Central podcast is a very cool podcast where I explain high-end concepts to lay people. And by me, I interview experts, much like the expert that's coming up next. It's an audio podcast. It's available on your favorite podcast player, or you can check it out over at psychcentral.com/show. It's even like right on the window for you. I've made it as simple as humanly possible. All right, are you ready to get started? I hear like a roar all across America because they are so excited for our super guest, Jodi. Jodi, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Gabe. I'm so happy to be here.
I like to let guests introduce themselves. So, of course, I have told our audience nothing about you except that you are an expert and your name is Jodi. So please introduce yourself.
Sure. Yeah. My name's Jodi Aman. I'm a family therapist. I've been doing it for a really long period of time. Now I'm an author. I have a new book out, Anxiety. I'm so done with you. It's a teen's guide. And so I'm also a YouTuber, so you can find lots of my videos on YouTube, just helping people really get past really difficult times in their life and hardwire their brain for happiness. That's what I'm all about.
That is awesome. Thank you so much for being here. Now, we're discussing emotional resilience, and we're doing a focus on family and staff facing back to school. So, but we'll get into that for a second, because when we did our little, pre-work, our little back-end interview, you're like, let's do emotional resilience. And the first thing that popped in my brain is, what the hell is that? Can you explain the concept of emotional resilience to our audience?
Well, it's another way to say like having robust mental health. Right. So to build up your resilience to difficult situations. And right now we're in a world and we don't even know what is going on. And there's so much chaos out there and there's so much uncertainty. And so it's, how do you become resilient? How do you become actually more robust as a person, even through that chaos? I think this is what we need right now more than anything. And yes, the staff, the families, and the students, like we need to support these young people right now, right? We want to come out of this pandemic even better than we went into it.
I really like that. Now we're going to jump right in. I have a million questions for you, but I want to start off with sort of the conflicting information that's out there, because I know that, there's some information that says, masks don't work. There's other information that says masks will save us all. There's information that it's safe to go back to school. There's information that it's so dangerous we can't line up to vote, and just on and on and on and on. And I imagine that if you are a person living in the world, you don't know which information to believe. And especially in our society with literal access to 24/7 news, this makes being emotionally resilient even more difficult. Can you talk about that for a moment?
Yes. When fear is big, and it is, we have a context for fear right now. So it's not like something's wrong with you if you're afraid right now, or if you have anxiety right now. This is a normal human response to what's going on, right? To have this fear. But when you have a lot of fear, it feels out of control. Out of control is a hallmark of anxiety, And so when you feel that way, you want to get control over something. So you want to get control over the facts. We don't have, everyone's guessing on a lot of things, and then we're getting different information. And so we kind of need something to hold on to. And so you could kind of see people out of that fear holding on to stuff, a lot of blame going on, people trying to get control over others. And so what we see in this discord that we're seeing online everywhere, is people's fear, living out their fear and trying to get control over the situation when it feels so out of control.
You've certainly described an unhealthy way to get control of that fear, arguing with people online, seeking, social media validation for your personal beliefs while ignoring others. We could probably talk all day on the wrong thing to do, but what I don't see a lot of people talking about is, how do we get control of that fear in an emotionally and mentally healthy way? with that, probably you're going to say don't get on social media, which is awkward since we're all over social media right now. But what is a way to control that anxiety in a healthy way? Because like you said, people are afraid, and we need to get control of that fear somehow.
Well, I think what's important is like there's so much coming at us that's reminding us how out of control we are, but it's not really the total truth. There is so many things that we do have choice over, that we do have control over, but we're clouded and in our faces, all this stuff we're out of control over. So our anxiety is going up. We feel trapped there. We feel trapped like we can't and helpless. But really, there's tons of decisions within our restrictions right now. Yes, we have restrictions, but there's tons of decisions and choices in there. And if we start to engage in those choices, it actually opens us up and we actually see even more choices. But when we're stuck in the anxiety and so stuck in it, we see more and more limits. And so this is how you connect with your own sovereign power, and it's actually going to open you up to more things. Like you see what you believe. So if you believe you're restricted and you can't and your rights are being taken away, then it's going to really make you feel out of control, and you're going to start to like go out there and say something about it. And then if you see, well, there's restrictions, let's get creative. Let's problem solve. Let's figure out how to make happiness within this. Then it's going to open you to more things. And that's what I'm saying is emotional resilience.
I think it's incredible, or I'm sorry, I think it's incredible because one of the things that you're sort of talking about is like reframing, right? And instead of looking at it as I'm trapped in my house, instead look at it as I'm staying home to keep myself and my family safe, right? And I think that's like a really, really powerful thing, because if you're looking at it as I'm trapped in my house, it's very negative, and it brings up negative emotions. If you say I'm keeping me and my family safe, that's very powerful, right?
Right. You have the power instead of not having the power.
Yeah. Is that sort of what you're describing? And that's not an easy thing to do. I mean, speaking as somebody who suffers from anxiety, it's like, oh, well, why don't I just exercise more, eat right? I'll make up with family members. It all seems very just cheer up. What are some ways to get to there?
Well, I think this is the thing is that, anxiety is such a beacon for our attention. It tells us these things that are like, oh, this is really bad. You got to look at this. You got to figure this out. And it's engaging. It's so engaging. It can happen to anybody. And so we engage in it because we think, oh, we have to solve this. We have to figure this out. This is awful. And really that makes us not see all these other things. So it's not just we have to reframe and say we're staying home to be safe with our family. There is a million of things that we could engage in at home. Like we could engage in creative pursuits. We could make something. We start a business. We could, make videos online. We could write a book. I mean, there's so many, and the people who are doing that, like starting new crafts, building stuff in their backyard, changing a room in their house, those people are doing a lot better right now than people that are feeling trapped and just seeing all the things that they can't do.
And it's probably important. It's probably important to point out, we tend to go like with really high level things, write a book, redesign a room in your house, learn a foreign language. But the tiny things really matter. Speaking from experience, my wife and I decided, well, we'll clean out the pantry. Listen, this pantry hasn't been cleaned out in 5 years. We found stuff that expired before we moved to this house, which means we literally moved expired goods into our new house. The whole thing took like 45 minutes, but we felt really good about it. So I think it's probably, like I said, we tend to think, learn a language. Maybe clean out
it could be
the
small
linen closet.
Exactly. It's like, try to, I don't know, you learn a new craft, right? There's so many things that we have around our house that we bought sometime and stored somewhere. I mean, take stuff out and make something out of it, or clean it out. A lot of people are cleaning out their basements and closets, and I am too. I'm right there. We keep cleaning out different rooms because we just accumulate a lot of stuff, don't we? But it does feel good. Actually, when you clear out that stuff, it actually does something for the mind. So you got two bonuses. One's that you're doing something creative. Now, cleaning out a closet is problem solving. Right? It's a creative. Like you have to make a decision about everything you touch. Do I keep this? Do I throw it out? Do I build a shelf to make it work? Like you have to make decisions all the time. And our brain is evolved for 2 million years as hunter-gatherers, problem solving all day. And now we don't have that. So we need to do it or else we're going to get lost in some negative thoughts. We have such capacity. And so when we're not using that, the negativity is going to take over.
I can sort it sort of reminds me of something my grandmother used to say, like, idle's hands or the devil's playground. It's like
Oh,
our
yeah.
idle mind it just allows that negativity to seep in, and then once, at least for me, I can only speak for myself, but once that negative thought gets in there, it just starts ruminating. And that, the hey, Jodi didn't respond to my email becomes Jodi hates me and she's told everybody that we know in common that she hates me, and I'm blocked on social media and I'm going to lose my job. But it all started with that little tiny spark. It seems like what you're describing is get ahead of that little tiny spark.
Exactly. I mean, it needs your mind space to continue to spiral like that. It needs some space in your mind to do that. And if you're doing something with a sense of purpose, if you're doing something with other people, if you're connected, you get out of there faster, and you're actually using that to do something. I mean, the adrenaline that we have, like, the whole point of it is to take some kind of action, and we want to matter. We want to have a sense of purpose. That's what's really people are struggling with, is like, when you're home all day, like, you don't matter. Like, you don't have a sense of purpose. And even our teens, I wrote the book for teenagers, and it's like, they need a sense of purpose right now. It's so important to them because you're untethered without that, and you feel isolated, and you don't feel like a sense of belonging without a sense of purpose. And that's something that we really, really need.
I completely agree. Pivoting ever so slightly to the focus on family and staff pacing back to school, this was one of the things that really, that's like a real big demarcation in society. Period. Like if it was a regular time of year, back to school is like a season. We've got like the holiday season, we've got the summer, we've got spring, and we've got back to school. It's everywhere. I don't have children. I'm in my 40s, and even I know when back to school is, because it's such a big part of our society. And here it is, and it's completely different than it ever was. And my first question is, how do families, teachers, and counselors help build robust emotional resilience as we head into fall, especially since one of the things that you brought up is, families and teachers, they've got their own feelings on it. Kids have completely different feelings. Families feel awkward sending the kids to school. Teachers, this is their profession, so they're like, should I be here? Is this safe? And then children are a completely different mindset, being the ones who have to go. So it's not all three categories going through the exact same thing, even though it looks like all three. It's a lot.
Yeah, I really feel like there's been this pandemic before we heard about what's happening in the fall. And now there's the pandemic after we hear about what's happening in the fall. And I don't know if you felt it. I felt like a big shift. I do have kids. So I've one in college and one in high school, and the other one's done. But, having kids and being so waiting to see what happens next, there was this big waiting time. And now that we know what happens, it's like, now we got to hunker down. This is going to be a long time. At first it's like, it's going to be over soon. It's going to be over soon. Let's just push through. Now it's like, we're going to be here for a while. And so there's a bit of a shift, but with that focus, thinking about going back to what the choices that you do have. I mean, I help parents think about like how to prepare their kids, because the school's going to look so different, even if they do in person. There is some places doing in person, and parents have a choice, a lot of places, if they're going to do that or not, or if they're going to homeschool. And so you need to kind of walk them through what it might be like. Find out as much as you can from the school district, what it's going to be like, have them close their eyes, really picture it, and really be calm and know the choices that they have within that. You want to connect them now to that sovereign power, that ability to find your choices within the restrictions. We always have restrictions on us. We don't have enough money to buy something, so we work around it. We don't have the food in our house because we haven't gone to the grocery store. We find something else to eat. Like we get we don't get the best thing. We have the canned stuff that we haven't touched in a long time in our pantry. So, we are workaround people, but right now we forget that we have this incredible skills to adapt and problem solve. We're forgetting that. So if the parents engage in it, they're going to model it for the kids. And if they're taking the kids through guided visualizations about what school's going to be like, and not touching your face and the masks and getting them used to the masks, then I think it's going to help us a whole bunch more. teachers as well, all people actually, with everything that we're dealing with right now, is we need to start looking at our abilities to adapt, and then even doing some guided visualization to calm ourselves down and seeing ourselves in different events and seeing ourselves as powerful in those events to make choices. And it's going to calm us. It's going to make us not as angry. It's going to make us kinder to the people around us. It can really change everything.
One of the things that I'm thinking about, of course, is that children have, arguably the least amount of rights in society. For example, if I am asked to go back to work and I don't want to, while it may be a difficult choice, but I do have the ability to say no. I understand that there's a cost with saying no. I lose my health insurance, I lose money, financial research, but at its core, I can refuse to go to work. Children cannot refuse to go to school. And I can understand how this drives, especially, older kids, 15, 16, 17-year-olds who, maybe understand more of what's going on. They're old enough to do research, read the news, be influenced by the news. They do not have the ability to say, no, I don't feel safe. I don't want to go to school, in the same way that we have the ability to say, no, I don't feel safe. I want to go to work. What's the connection there?
Oh, that's a hard one. You're stumped me. No, I mean, it's a family decision, right? So the parents do have that power because legally they have the power to make decisions. It's a right of the parent to make decisions for anyone under 18. And so kids probably need to take that up with their own parents, and it should be a family decision, whether they, because there is other choices besides going to in-person school, even if that's the only thing your district allows. There is homeschooling choices, but that is a family decision that you have to make. So maybe you're right. Maybe parents are like, go, you're fine. And the kids doesn't feel very comfortable. And it becomes an issue between and it's a kind of an individual case by case issue between the parents and the child, how to negotiate that. And if you're a teen and you find yourself in that kind of situation, see if you can find like an auntie or somebody else or a grandparent or to help you navigate or negotiate with your parents about what might be the best step forward. It's not trying to like pit your grandmother against your mom or anything, but try to do your research, come up with, my kids, if they just argue with me, if they want to do something and I said no, and they just say, you're the worst and you don't know and you don't understand anything, you don't get it. But if they come to me, is there any negotiation here? Can I negotiate this? It's totally different, right? Because that's what I've taught my kids, that negotiation skills is to how to, if I say no, if they yell at me and are a jerk to me about it and gaslight me, it's never changing. That answer is never changing. But if they say, can I negotiate? My son did that last week. He wanted to go to a campfire outside with some friends. And now he's got poison ivy. But I said, I don't think so, because there was a reason. And he came out and says, is this negotiable? And we negotiated and he was able to go. But, and I felt good with it, but, he was able to go and that worked for us. But, like, I think that's what you want to teach your kids to negotiate. And when I'm counseling, I teach all my clients how to negotiate with their parents instead of bullying them. It doesn't get us anywhere. We see how these fights on Facebook and no one's changing their opinion. You're not converting anybody. There's all this bullying going on. And so what really we have to teach young people is like negotiate. And negotiation means you give something to get something, right? There's an exchange and there's a connection in there. It's a mutually, you both win from that.
I'm thinking back to my own childhood, and anytime my dad and I, we butted heads like nothing because, my dad would come in hot because he would be angry, and I would just match him.
Yeah.
Just work. So of course I lost. It would have been nice if we would have had all of this, if you would have written your book in the 80s, that could have been helpful, because I learned older. My sister did not have this problem. And of course I said, well, it's because my sister's the favorite. No. It's because my sister was rational. She would always say, Daddy, I think that blah, 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 blah. And my dad would start putting together pieces that he initially didn't think of. Do you think it's hard? I mean, this is a big deal. Education is paramount. I mean, we want our children to be intelligent. We want them to have skills, both because we want our kids to be smart and because we want our kids to have job prospects. So as much as I would love to just sit back and say, well, we just need to let the science decide if we go to school, I also think, do we want a group of children who haven't been taught formally or missed out on a year? And I'm not an educator. I am not a researcher. So I'm not pretending that I know the answer to this question. But I can see how that would drive a lot of anxiety. Do I want to keep my child safe from COVID, or do I want my child to miss out on education? And it seems like a real rock and a hard place choice. How are people supposed to help make that decision? Because like you said, they're fearful they're going to make the wrong one.
Exactly. But I don't know. I think that I think there are alternatives to school. There is a lot of richness in homeschooling curriculums. I'm not even pushing that. Like, I never did that with my kids, but I have a lot of friends who do. But there's a lot of richness that these kids are mature, they're confident, they're growing up just great. They do have some social outlets. I mean, there is a lot of benefits. So there is alternatives. And I think that's what we might not be seeing. Now, right now, if you're not open to it, you don't see it. But there is alternatives if you really want them and you're really looking. And if our kids were off for a year, but it wouldn't be doing nothing. They wouldn't be like sleeping all day and unmotivated. They would be engaging in other ways to learn. And there's a lot of other ways to learn. I mean, if you think about, when I think about high school, because, I've been working with kids and teens for so long. But when I think about high school, I think the most important part of high school is teaching kids to do hard things. Teaching them time management, teaching them how to do something they don't want to do, teach them how to deal with difficult people, make a deadline. Those life skills are so much more important than the actual content or the year of this war or something like that. I mean, I think it's important, any those skills, you'd have to relearn them later. Like, I don't remember all algebra stuff, but if I had to do it for work, I could relearn it. But the fact that I went through high school, college, grad school, I know now that I could do stuff that's hard. I know, I have like this confidence and faith in myself. Could we build that without school? Yeah, we could build that without school. We could make them educable. We could make them emotionally resilient. We could. I'm not advocating for it. I'm not an educator either, but I think there is other options. I don't think they would be way behind if we spent the whole year building emotional resilience and infinities for different things, different topics, being interested or being creative. If they had to be creative, like I said, their brains would develop so much more. There's a lot of lack of creativity in school as well,
I'm sort of reminded of Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader? And of course, all the fifth graders, they just recently learned what year the war was and just all of this stuff that adults did learn in school, but we've long since forgotten because we don't use it day to day. And I think I'm not saying that it's bad to learn history. Please, I don't want anybody to say that. It's vital to learn wars, history. It's good to have this base knowledge. But I think it's also good to have this knowledge of how to apply it and how to think about it and critical thinking skills and things like that. And it's probably also important to note that one of the things that's, I think, drawing a lot of anxiety is I think we forget that we're all in this together. The people that I talk to, they think that their family is the only one. And I understand. I often feel like I'm the only one trapped in my house, which is, it's a little bit narcissistic, but it's definitely arrogant for me to believe that I'm the only one suffering because of this. How do we get outside of ourselves and acknowledge that really the whole world is experiencing this at the same time? Because it's so easy to believe that it's only our family, our lives, our children who are impacted.
Oh, I love that you asked that, because I think this is a problem with the individualistic culture, right? So when we first started the pandemic and we first closed down, we were isolated, but we felt like we were part of something because we were thinking about the whole world together. And now that we've been home for so long, the impact of the isolation is changing our thinking, and it does. I've been noticing this with people. Like, there's a lot of negative impact of isolation on us. We tend to get more negative. We tend to feel more alone. We tend to feel like people don't like us, when that's not anything that's happening in our reality. It just happens. Like, isolation is the worst thing for the human psyche. we're social beings, so we're supposed to be around people. But, in the last 50 to 100 years, we've been having smaller and smaller households. And this is the effects of it, is like this isolation. So if you have a teenager, make sure they're out and talking to you. Make sure they're not in the room all day. Isolation is so hard on, it just makes people not like themselves, like immediately, pretty quickly. And also it makes people not care about getting better. It makes people tired. It makes them unmotivated. And we think they're motivated because they're bored or because all the stress and anxiety. They're unmotivated because they're isolated.
Gotcha.
Like the dopamine stops going off, and then they don't even care about doing anything because they're just not used to that. You got to get them out. You got to get that dopamine going, or else they're not even going to want to get better. So that's what I'm seeing as a really big problem. And I think that if people knew what that was, but so in the beginning of the pandemic, people felt like they were part of the whole world. Now I'm seeing that less and less. Like we see less news about Europe and wherever, and even in Asia and what's going on with other countries and coronavirus, when we were totally saying that in the beginning of this all.
I want to pivot ever so slightly. We've been talking a lot about adults and teachers and families making this decision. What are the teens thinking? I mean, the actual kids and teens, how are they feeling about this? What's their perspective?
Well, I think people who didn't like to go to school before still don't want to go back to school. But, a lot of them want to go back. They just want to get back to normal. They don't want to be home anymore. They want to see their friends. Most kids want to go back to school. Because, a lot of the teens I've been talking to are not paying attention to the deaths and the numbers and they're not paying attention to that stuff. So they're not as scared. And so they've started to, now that I'm in New York State, so the shelter in place came down a month or two ago, and we were able to social distance outside. And of course the weather got warmer too. It was freezing. We couldn't do that. But once they dropped precautions pretty quickly. You could see that when you see them in groups, they have to be reminded over and over by the adults. Gotcha. And so they really, when they're in those, they forget that there's a problem still. They've really compartmentalized. So I think it's like, we don't want to create anxiety and get them really worried about it, but we really have to let them remember that there's a threat, but there's stuff that they could do in it, that they're empowered problem solvers. Right? Not anxious and trapped and there's nothing to do. There is a threat here, but you are an empowered problem solver, and there's tons of things that you could do to keep yourself safe, and this is what they are. But if you keep forgetting there's a threat, you're not going to do those things.
I know that one of the things that I was thinking about is Gabe at 15, 16 years old. I was invincible. I remember when I got my driver's license, my parents were just so terrified that I was going to get it because I didn't see cars as dangerous. I'd been in cars my whole life. Nothing bad had ever happened. So cars were safe. And I know that I hydroplaned and spun around and it scared me. And I know that my parents probably think that that's the best thing that could have happened to me. No damage. I didn't get hurt, but it terrified me, this idea that I could actually lose control of this vehicle that has the ability to hurt me. Do you think that some of that plays in, just children believe they're invincible?
Absolutely. That is exactly what's going on. And then there's the cognitive dissonance. Like, smoking's bad, but you still do it anyway. It's called cognitive dissonance. So you know that it's bad not to wash your hands or or hug your friend, or whatever, talk close or kiss. But you do it anyway because it's like in the moment, you just kind of make excuses that you're a bit invincible. And so, I believe that there's no point to anxiety. It's pure suffering, but there is a point to having some fear or knowing that there's a threat. Because it does make us conscious, right? Fear brings consciousness to situations so that we can decide how to act. And we want them to know that there's a threat, but we don't want them to be anxious because that doesn't really help anybody. I define anxiety as a leftover fear response when you're not in physical danger. So I like to make this difference for them because I want them to be empowered problem solvers in this situation going forward. So they have to know that there's something there.
I'm just thinking from a teenager's perspective, answer this question as if a 17-year-old is sitting in front of you.
Okay.
And says, My parents are crazy. They think I'm going to die. I don't want to do this. I'm fine. All my friends are fine. I want to go to the beach. I don't think there's a problem here. Why can't I leave? And you know, they've already exhausted their parents. So they've brought them to you. You're sitting in front of the 17-year-old that literally sees zero problem. The word pandemic means nothing to them. And you're trying to help them understand without also giving them crippling fear and anxiety.
Wow. Yeah, that's right. And I think we're seeing that, you know, if you are on Facebook right now somewhere, you see people who are just denying that this is going on, right? Because it's so scary to think that it's true that you'd want to deny it. That's like cognitive dissonance too. It's like, I can't handle the thought of that bad. And some people are saying, and they look like smart people, and they're saying that it's all a lie. And I want to believe that. And also this is the other thing. It's like everybody's gaslighting each other. So the people are like, we have to keep safe, wear the masks. Like, this is what we have to do to help each other. Other people are saying you're fear-based. You know, that's your fear going on. You're just like, you know, worshiping fear right now. Right. So it's like, so kids are like, well, that sounds right. Right. That sounds right. I don't want to live in anxiety and live in fear. I'm going to live out of fear. Like, without fear, I'm going to just not care about the virus. That's what I see is happening. Right? Isn't that what you see happening?
Yeah, there's even clothing that says no fear. It was long before the pandemic, but this whole toughness, braveness, no fear, follow the line of people who agree with you and ignore everything else. But how do you get through to that teenager? Because they have to exist in the world. We can. I notice that a lot of adults are like, well, teenagers are stupid. Who cares? And for the most part, I understand why adults have that. But this is different. There's certain things like driving, for example, that you just can't take that, oh, kids are stupid, they'll be fine because it's dangerous. I feel like the global pandemic is one of those things that they need to have some awareness of it. But we don't want them to be scared and anxious. So I don't want to sit them down and be like, you're going to die, because that's not the right answer. But I also don't want them walking around like there's no problem, because children make up, 20% of the world, 30% of that's a lot of people that can inadvertently help spread. So I
totally agree. Yeah. That's why we want to, when we're presenting what the threat is, you want to appeal to their kindness to others. That helps my kids. I'm going to speak personally. What helps my kids to keep it aware, because they're very kind, and what helps them keep aware is thinking, okay, I got to do this for my grandma, because my mother-in-law lives with us. And so that helps them I want to keep it in their awareness and without anxiety. So if it's in their awareness, they could do something to help somebody else. And then they know all we're asking is to wash your hands when you come in. If you're in a car with somebody else, wear a mask. We're not asking for that. They have to wear a mask everywhere they go anyway, but there's only such little request that we're making. And so that's why it might be a little bit easier. They forget, they come in the house all the time without washing their hands. And I'm like, did you, after 5 months, how could they forget to wash their hands when they come in the house? I'm like, I did a terrible job. All as parents, we blame ourselves immediately, right? It's like, oh, I just did a bad job. But they were really home most of that time. They didn't go out. So they didn't get that wasn't embodied yet. Same with the mask. They're not, young people are not using it as much. I mean, like teens and kids, because they're either outside with their friends or they're home. So they're not using it that much. They might go into a store or something really briefly. And so we really need to build up their tolerance to wearing a mask, because they're going to have to wear it so much longer when they're in school. And also touching their face. They've been home. And so they haven't incorporated that. They haven't broken the habit of touching their face constantly. I don't know if you've got, I've gone to family parties and we're all social distancing outside, and there's 2 families there and everybody's spread out in the lawn and talking to each other. And I'm watching my kids touch their faces. Okay, they're not touching anybody else. And so they haven't, but that's the whole point, is that, when they're in higher risky situations, they have to know that. And so this is We need to keep bringing it up. And if they're going to gaslight us and say, you're always in anxiety, you're so worried about the coronavirus, that's their way of, it's a rebellion. It's a way of putting it down. That's what you see a lot of the adults doing. So we can't blame them for doing that kind of thing. We have to kind of teach them that, no, I'm not in fear. I'm an empowered problem solver. There's a threat. I make choices to make myself feel better, not to make myself feel, to do better for the greater good, right, is what it is. It's not about me. Right. So I had that, I was on a retreat in March. And so I was in Egypt, and there was actually coronavirus on the Nile, and I was on a cruise on the Nile. And so I was like, well, when I go home, I'm going to quarantine. And the other people on the retreat was like, that's so fear-based. And I'm like, you have to realize it's social responsibility. It's not fear-based. Like, I don't have any anxiety about it. I'm going to make a choice for the greater good. But when that's cognitive dissonance, that they can't see that they have to gaslight me. And I knew what was happening, so I didn't take it in. But like, we see that. I just want to share that because you could see that happening over and over and over. And that's why that's happening.
Plus, whenever we're talking about children, we always have to take a deep breath, because they'll figure out all your buttons to push, because they're learning boundaries, and we have adults that aren't good with boundaries. So it's probably unreasonable to expect your average, teenager, 15, 16, 17, even 18, 19 and 20-year-olds to be good with this. I don't think I became decent to my parents until I was about 25. Then I was like, oh no.
Well, that's when the prefrontal cortex is totally developed, right?
Yay!
But I did remember too, because my stepson's 28, my son's 20. But when he was maybe a sophomore in college, he started to deeply appreciate and express this appreciation for us. That he didn't, that was normal as a teenager. You don't do that, but as he was growing, like 22, 23, it was like a drastic change in really realizing, wow, I was so lucky. Maybe he had roommates and stuff that had terrible parents and all this crazy stuff happening. And, but then saw us as like, oh, I was so lucky. Thank God. It's really nice. So I can't wait. I have a couple more years for my son to be that, but like, I can't wait.
Well, Jodi, thank you. Our time was up like 7 minutes ago, so that's how awesome you are. Thank you so much for being here. Jodi is the author of, and I'm assuming, I know you showed it, pop it back up there, Anxiety, I'm So Done With You, A Teen's Guide to Ditching Anxiety. It's a fabulous book. I know you're going to say Amazon.com, but I just ask this question all the time anyways. How do people buy your book?
Well, if you come over to my website now, jodiaman.com, or you could go jodiaman.com/book. I am signing copies and actually literally myself mailing people copies of the book. So it's a couple dollars extra than Amazon, because I can't do the free shipping, but yeah, buy it from me.
Yeah. Support local authors. We're supporting local businesses. We have to support local authors. We don't have J.K. Rowling money. That's really the message, right? I mean, we're not Stephen King or John Grisham. I think every author I just named is so old.
Yeah. And you get my healing energy. When I sign the book, I give it to you. Like, your kid has it. Like, I vibrated this book to really heal them, heart, mind, and soul. And so you just get some extra if you buy it right from me.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Jodi, for being here. We really, really appreciate you. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Please check out the audio podcast. It's available on really every single podcast player imaginable, or of course, you can go straight to psychcentral.com/show. We'll see everybody next time. Bye.